Hello. Good evening. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everyone. Yes, Daniel and Victoria always try to challenge me by giving me this most difficult slot in the day. And after a super jam-packed day of the EBC, I'm sure I'm getting a bit tired. So I decided to put on my wireless Christmas Santa headphones to cheer you up a little bit. But anyway, listen, welcome to the last two sessions of the EBC. The first one I'm very excited about because it gives me a chance to come back and have a panel discussion with Sebastian. We already met at a panel discussion here at EBC a couple of years ago. And then we have Tanya, Shastri and Juan Jiménez, who will be joining us in the EBC for the first time. The topic of discussion is DLT and the future of financial institutions. I think this is good because it obviously implies there's a future, and that's what we want to discuss. And it would be the same as discussing DLT and the future of finance, because financial institutions are, I think, an intrinsic part of what the future of finance was going to be. So I'm going to take off these amazing headphones so I can really hear you properly. And Tanya, would you please give us just a couple of minutes intro into what you're currently doing, your background, and if you could, what got you hooked into blockchain?
Fantastic. Hi, Mai. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good evening. Hi from me. I'm actually calling in from California Bay Area, so good morning from me, but it's wonderful to be here. I'm VP of Product for Blockchain at VMware, and for those of you who may not be familiar with VMware, we're a technology company bringing innovative technology to enterprise customers for maybe over 2 decades now. And really the goal of the company is to bring this technology innovation so that our customers and the enterprise customers can then in turn innovate for their business outcomes and do it rapidly, but also very robustly, right? Because we want this to be solutions that deliver business critical outcomes. And it's that mindset really that we've extended to blockchain, and that's our blockchain portfolio. We commercialized it, brought it to commercial availability late last year. And maybe a little bit about myself to kind of complement why I'm here, why I'm at VMware and what I'm doing here. So my background has been in the enterprise technology space. I've spent several years before VMware. I was at Google, did a bunch of things on the Google Cloud platform related to big data, machine learning, and software as a service products and so on. So I've always loved to be at that leading edge of the technology and bringing it so that there are some successful business outcomes. And of course, then blockchain actually brings both those elements together so dramatically almost. It's kind of the next evolution in infrastructure, and it also just enables some tremendously transformational business outcomes, right? So I think it's both those together that are very interesting. And at VMware, there's been years already spent on the technology, and some very unique technology innovation came out of our research teams and so on. That partly was what attracted me to the opportunity. It is kind of from the ground up being built for the enterprise. And also, it's a really great company. Just explaining my background here as that lovely because ESG is reported.
Sorry to interrupt, but it is cutting for me the sound. Is it working for you all, or it's not working, right? Tanya, I think we're having a little issue with your sound. Should we try to reconnect and regain control of the sound and image?
I think it's better now.
Is it better now?
It's much better, yeah. I mean, the thing, as we said at the beginning, all sessions, absolutely all sessions are live. So these technical obstacles are pretty normal activity. So thank you for coming back, Tanya. Let's try again.
Yes, sorry, should I go from the beginning? I'm not sure where I dropped off.
Tanya,
well, I don't know.
Yeah, but I think unless somebody else, we understood your journey. You explained to us clearly your journey through Google. I find quite interesting how VMware has been doing the work you've been doing for over 2 decades, looking at the technology, but how now you felt that blockchain was bringing in this, but also the evolution of infrastructure, but also the changes in business. Tanya, we're going to give you a little break and so we move on to Sebastian, also for his 2-3 minutes intro. And don't worry about it happens. IT is IT. If the sign is evening time as well, so if Wi-Fi or connection breaks down, we'll just go back to that. Okay. Thanks, Tanya. Sebastian, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Mai. Hello again, and hello to everybody. Thanks for the invitation, of course. I'm Sebastian Kraft. I'm Principal Product Owner for DLT and Blockchain within Commerzbank. For those who are not familiar with Commerzbank, it's the second largest universal private bank in Germany. And we are investigating in blockchain technology since a couple of years already, I think since 5 years or so, in a very, very broad approach. So with digital assets, so everything you can imagine around capital markets, assets like securities, but also crypto, of course, digital money like CBDC, commercial bank money token, digital identities. It's the third topic we are covering, trying to establish self-sovereign identity here. And last but not least, of course, also trade finance. And we are currently on a journey away from building POCs and having an R&D or being in an R&D phase to a phase where we want to bring stuff into production. That's the goal which we are currently having and following. Personally, I am addicted to blockchain since 2017, not because I'm the tech-savvy, biggest tax expert the world has ever seen, but rather I accepted the challenge to dig deeper into a technological topic, which I did not do before. And I was digging and digging and digging, and then finally I didn't find out of the rabbit hole anymore. So that's why I'm still here since a couple of years now, and very happy to be so. And also very happy to be here today on the panel and to share my opinion on DLT and the future of financial institutions. Thanks a lot.
That's fantastic, Sebastian. I love that you say that you got addicted to blockchain, and the rabbit hole doesn't look like a rabbit hole anymore, does it? It's just like your day to day. I know what it feels like. So listen, it's a pleasure to be back on a panel discussion with you again. And you know, I'm sure a lot has happened in the world of Commerzbank and particularly in your role since we last spoke. Juan, may I give you the floor? Please give us an update about yourself. I think it's your first time as well at the EBC, so we're really keen to hear when did you get bitten by the blockchain bug?
Yeah, thank you, Mai. Thank you, EBC, both Victoria and Daniel, for inviting me. It's amazing the way this event is growing every year, and it's becoming a landmark. So yeah, I've been in the financial industry for a while already, like 20 years or something. Mostly focused in investment banking myself. So I was part of the trading floor capital markets activity here at Santander, which is first bank of the Eurozone and quite present in Europe, but also Latin America. And back in 2015, I changed a little bit my focus, my devotion at the bank, and I was invited to become part of something that we called Digital, Santander Digital. So yeah, I was since inception driving the innovation agenda and the fintech agenda for the whole group, both Europe, Latin America, and some parts of US. It was of course difficult, to figure it out, and was mostly focused in retail. My background has been wholesale, so I was the guy taking care of the digital agenda for wholesale and corporate and investment banking. And there, I can tell you that this is where I think that at least at Santander, we witnessed more impact, more disruption, and more use cases in the wholesale and capital markets activity. I was part of a team launching the different initiatives, liquidity management, bond issuance, equity capital markets opportunity, also using crypto assets, And it was a year ago that I moved on and I decided to join public policy, which is an interesting part that we have here at Santander for positioning the group when it comes to regulation. There's lots of new regulation underway, as you know. So I'm taking care of the pilot regime, the DLT pilot regime, MiCA, EIDAS 2 when it comes to SSI, self-sovereign identity, and also all the prudential framework for crypto assets. Although this is level 1 and level 2 treatment that we are going to suffer. And as a side activity, I also got the invitation or the opportunity of leading Alastria, which is the blockchain ecosystem in Spain, and not only in Spain, we're becoming more and more European and international. It's already 600 members, institutional side, corporate side, and SMEs working together, putting together, also an opportunity at a national level. As we all know, blockchain is all about network effect, and this is what we're trying there. And yeah, this is me. And happy to contribute here, of course.
You sound like a very busy man, Juan. So we'll get the best out of you in the next 30 minutes. Tanya has some problems reconnecting, but we have so much to talk about. So we will kick off, if that's okay, maybe focusing or discussing a little bit around capital markets. The reason why, because I see a thread amongst all of you. Juan, you mentioned the DLT pilot regime. I wonder, I mean, the thing about being virtual is that you can't look around the audience and see people nodding or not. But in terms of how many people maybe actually attending this are aware what the DLT pilot regime is, if maybe you could give a couple of minutes around that, because as you know, it was just approved a couple of weeks ago. I think that would be very interesting. And then after Juan mentions and brings over to the audience's attention the DLT pilot regime and why it's important from a financial institution's perspective and the future financial institutions. Maybe Sebastian, I know in the past that you guys in Commerzbank had also done some work around capital markets. Again, you know, your views, what were the obstacles, and why do you think that DLT is potential? Guys, give me details, give me names, give me really the hairy bits and the good bits, because those are attending the EBC are people who actually have an interest in blockchain. They've been listening, they know the high level points, they're listening to us to really get to know more at that level below. So please, Juan, would you be able to tell us a bit more around the DLT pilot regime and why do you think, I think it'd be key to that future financial institutions using DLT?
Yeah, so pilot regime, as it goes, is the way the European Commission approaches the regulation, the pretty much needed regulation that we were gelling to have as dealers, but also as financial institutions when bridging supply and demand in capital markets, buy side from one side and issuers from the other side. We started the journey like 3 years ago with no regulation in place. So like figuring out, testing the waters and betting on the technology and betting on this, the opportunity that was in front of us. But as I mentioned, we all need in the industry something to anchor, something to tell the clients, hey, this thing you're doing here is going to be safe, it's going to be done in a proper manner, we're going to protect the investor, we're going to protect the issuer at the same time, and that this is what we've been working with the European Commission. The pilot regime at the end of the day it's going to become enforceable, but we got an agreement a couple of weeks ago, and it goes under a framework that combined with DORA, but also combined with MiCA, will come up with a regulatory body that would be complete for setting into the market this new paper, as we call it, crypto assets or crypto paper, where we can use the power of blockchain and cryptography to boost capital markets and to put together new instruments that are similar to the traditional ones, but are built on this new technology and bring a new experience to the ecosystem in terms of speed, in terms of reconciliation, in terms of secureness. It's all done under cryptography. And in a nutshell, I'll tell you that it brings an interesting opportunity in terms of thresholds. There's a higher threshold now after all the negotiations. The overall threshold for the whole activity in Europe is going to be set in 6 billion outstanding debt for the whole market. It's not a lot, but it's a good start. It's a good starting point. I think that once the European Union regulators, they have more grip on this new market, they feel more comfortable. They already, control and master this pilot regime. This regime will become totally enforceable, no piloting anymore. So now we have these thresholds. There are also specific thresholds when it comes to fixed income and when it comes to equities that are expressed in market cap when it comes to equities, and in market and in ticket size when it comes to fixed income. And there's also an important piece of the regulation that deals with the role of ESMA, so the unique securities authority in the European Union, of what to do and how to coordinate also with local regulators around Europe. And the industry has, I think, had a warm receiving of this pilot regime, because is the door of a new capital markets ecosystem.
I think, the technology, I can see the benefits, but I think from a European perspective is the fact that we're looking at financial institutions being able to operate in a borderless European capital markets market. I think that's why I think the DLT pilot it's so attractive. Sebastian, has Commerzbank been involved? Is this something that you guys have looked at?
Yes, of course. So capital markets is one of the topics we looked into quite early. I think even our first use cases, which we were following, were capital markets use cases. So we did, we have live since 2019 already a solution called HQLAX, which is for the exchange of collateral and baskets of securities between banks, which yes, we took, I think, 2019 live already. We already did a 100% digital securities transactions also back in 2019 or 2020. I'm not really sure about it, including a cash leg, where one of our large corporates called Continental was issuing something to another investor called Jiménez. So two large companies who were very interested into this thing, which we did under Luxembourg law, because we were only able to do it under this regulatory regime. And in Germany, in addition to what we just heard about the pilot regime, in Germany we have the so-called EWPG, electronic security law in English, I would say, is the right translation, which enables us to get rid of the paper, which we by law still need in Germany. So we are able to bring now 100% digital securities onto the market. Nevertheless, there are still some obstacles to overcome. Like, for example, it's only suitable for bonds at the moment. And if you talk about some securities which you would normally trade over an exchange, you would still need the CSD, which is hindering the blockchain development a little bit. So there are still some things to overcome, but also from a regulatory perspective in Germany, there are things coming which are fostering the development of DLT in capital markets. One further thing which I would like to mention, which could boost yes, capital markets use cases, of course, the whole discussion around wholesale CBDC. Every time when you have a tokenized asset on blockchain in the capital markets, you normally also want to have a 100% secure DVP to reduce risk, and you want to have a cash leg on ledger to gain the full efficiency potentials which you have, especially in the post-trading of capital market transactions. And this is something where the ECB is currently not looking at, which I think is not the right thing. I think this is something which should be included in the ECB discussions. This for sure from my perspective. And yes, if the ECB is not bringing something like this into production in the coming years, we are also having, let me say, a second leg in Finality. Finality is, for example, a startup which is trying to bring as an auxiliary payment system tokens which are backed by central bank money onto the blockchain, which could be an alternative if ECB is not pursuing any activity on wholesale CBDC.
Thank you, Sebastian. I mean, it's just, I think it's great to hear the volume of projects that you looked into. I'm going to pick up on the wholesale CBDC. I'm going to park that for a little bit because Tanya's just back on and I want to bring it in. You both mentioned, obviously, we started the DLT project at European level. We talked about the Commerzbanks, and earlier on it was capital markets that you really looked into, and clearly that was when the application of DLT to that area was obviously seen at financial institutions as a future way, or a future-proofing way of securing some of their products. I'm aware, Tanya, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you and VMware have been working with ASX and also D7. Would you be able maybe to give us a 2-minute update or insight into those projects and why have they worked, or why, how, and how could they work better, maybe with more participants in those pilots?
Yes, absolutely. So I hope you can hear me properly first now. Yes, all right. I have resorted to my phone over my laptop, which seems to be behaving a little better. But a very good example of why resiliency and, we need backup options and we need to be able to keep going in spite of, what happens with technology, right? So it's a good segue into what we are doing generally in the DLT space. And just a little bit of context, I mentioned briefly again that we're a technology company. We've worked very deeply. This is over years with companies like ASX, that's the Australian Securities Exchange, with Broadridge Financials, with Deutsche Börse, Bursa Malaysia. So there's a bunch of companies that VMware has a long history with, and then we're bringing our blockchain technology and our DLT platform to bear there, right? So some of the things, just at a high level, we all know that, these multi-party systems benefit from this shared source of truth and automation of workflows and so on, right? And that's absolutely true, and we must do those pieces. I think the pieces that we have to add on when we think about these highly regulated, these are very large scale projects that we're talking about, right? We're talking about, multiple we're talking about not just billions, but trillions of dollars worth. And we're talking about kind of transaction volumes in the hundreds of millions per day and so on, right? So these are kinds of volumes and performance that both are important, as well as kind of what I call the robustness of the solutions. So some of the things that we do to bring, I'd say, confidence that these things can go to production at these high scales is where our focus is. And then we do it in a way where we stay true to all those blockchain primitives, right? The data integrity and, being able to ensure that trusted shared source of truth, but then overlaying over it privacy, which is super important for these regulated industries and businesses generally, right? Performance and efficiency. And then, those areas, the entire industry is making some big steps in those areas, right? But then there are areas that when you think of these regulated environments and there's terabytes of data coming in per day into these systems, you have to be able to do things like data pruning. How do you kind of take data off the blockchain or the DLT platform in a way that still allows you to have the entire history and provenance, but then allows the system to keep up with the performance it needs to keep up with and so on, right? And there are some very interesting areas like upgrades and reconfiguration of networks. And those who enjoy the technology will know that upgrades are quite unique in the DLT space. And how do we do that effectively at scale and do it in a way where the operational burden isn't too much, right? Those are the kinds of areas that we focus on so that our business partners can focus on doing what they need to do to get the businesses up and running and, ensure that it's supported. If anything goes down, there is a backup opportunity, there is disaster recovery, there is upgradability, all those things are kind of taken care of, and they know there's a trusted partner who can do it with them. So I'd say those are the kinds of things. And ASX, for example, has just made their Chess Plus application. This is for the entire post-trade clearing and settlement for the entire Australian equities market. It's been made open for industry-wide testing just end of last month. So that's really some great progress we're seeing there. And this is kind of really, when you think of the scale of these problems that and the kinds of things that ESX is taking on, it's quite impressive. Deutsche Börse as well, really leading the way with the D7 platform, kind of, the conversation around dematerialization and, being able to do that so that there are no physical documents, right? And then the data integrity and being sure that you don't lose anything and that it is maintained in the way it is, and there is no malicious activity that can change things at the core, right? All those things become super important. And just one last point there maybe is the awareness in the industry that the DLT technology, while we talk about multi-party systems and we talk about trust, there are, levels even in a permission network where all these are typically permission networks. It's still, you do want to be able to ensure, it's not like you don't trust your partners at all, but you want to have the infrastructure set up so that mistakes cannot be made, right? And I heard this nice sentence about don't be evil versus cannot be evil, right? You want it to be set up so that you cannot be evil. And it's not like anyone wants to be evil, but it's set up so that you cannot be, and all the parties can then transact with each other and the systems are robust and trustworthy, right? So I think that's really the angle that VMware takes and the role we plan to play in the industry. And there's, of course, I believe, collaboration across the technology vendors, the market operators and participants, as well as the regulators, and end to end we have to come together, right, to make things happen. And I think it's exciting to see that there's a lot of good things happening already, and based on the good things happening today, the future then comes to us even more quickly, right?
Tanya, very insightful. Absolutely. I have a million questions, and I'm conscious we do have 15 minutes and still so many things to discuss. And Sebastian, we'll go back to the wholesale payments piece. I'm just picking up on one of the questions in the audience, and thank you for those who are sending questions in. I'm seeing them all. I don't think we'll have time to answer them all. They're absolutely excellent. I'll just pick up the last one because Tanya just made reference to it. The question, you probably see it, is, in their opinion, banks and financial institutions will only utilize private permission blockchains and not public blockchains. And my question to you, Tanya, is what blockchains, what platforms are actually using, or you've actually worked with both D7 and the ASX. And second, does it matter that they're not public? Because maybe financial institutions, with their role, and in this future of finance and the role of financial institutions in this DLT future, maybe they'll be the ones that will be the gatekeepers for the permissions. So, would you be able to give us some insight on that? What's your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. And I think really from the to just bring an analogy into place, right? When you think about the internet or the network of networks, right? There are a lot of places where there are intranets, right? Where you have a reason to have an intranet, but then you connect into an internet and so on. So I think if we look at the future, there is already so much conversation around interoperability. How do networks kind of connect with each other? So I think I see the future anyway as a combination of private permission networks as well as public networks that have very good reason to interoperate in certain areas and very good reason to operate, in certain reasons separately, right? So things like, I'd even take something like performance. There are very unique ways and very unique requirements in performance. Some require much more throughput. Some require, latency to be very low, right? And even with privacy, right? You're going to have areas where, different types of privacy make sense in different contexts and so on, right? So there's going to be some amount of uniqueness required for particular use cases and particular market participant networks. And then there are going to be very good reasons why, some piece of it, some critical aspect from a data integrity standpoint, or, you want to keep the provenance standpoint may require to be put onto a public network in some ways, right? So I do see that both will continue to coexist, and that's my expectation for how things will progress. And then going back to the technology perspective, the technology is very, there are some very basic things that it brings. There are even cases where it could become a very, natural part of infrastructure, even for just a single enterprise, because you also think of things like, there is internal threat. You want to protect from your own employees, right? So blockchain provides value there as well. So it's from a technologist perspective, it goes the entire gamut. And I do think that's the way the industry is moving already, that, both the public and the commission networks are starting to kind of come closer to each other, which I think is what we need, right?
Fantastic. And I think your comparison with the intranet and the internet is just quickly understandable and a very good takeaway. And I think it's a comparison that I think I'm going to use personally in the future. So thank you so much for that, Tanya. Sebastian, I'm afraid there's a question directly directed to you, so that's okay. Should we pick that up? Because I think it's a very interesting as well.
Of course.
And someone's mentioned, yeah, it's all right.
I didn't see it. Hopefully it's not too complicated for me. No, just go ahead, please.
I think you see it. Do you see the need for an interbanking style DLT solution, or do you believe in interoperability between several solutions like R3, HLF, and VMware? And actually that links to another question that someone said as well, that why don't we see more consortium style, and we do some POCs amongst banks, but nothing really heavily towards production. So a tough one, but you can do it, Sebastian.
No, that's a great question, honestly, and some of the topics I have on my mind when answering it have already been touched by Tanya as well. So what I observe at the moment is that we have solitary islands which are currently evolving. And I think this is also worth it that they evolve, because this fosters the innovation. And if we think about building a one blockchain of all financial instruments and all financial services, we would have, I think, the next 6 or 7 years discussions around the governance and so on and so forth. So this is nothing which will be easily to be taken up. So I think you need these islands to come up, and then let's see what the time brings. If there is a solution for the interoperability, which will be one solution definitely, or if one or the other network thinks that it might make sense to merge in a later time. So both directions are possible there. So I think both will also, as Tanya was just saying, coexist. One thing which is very important, nevertheless, is that we think about standardization of specific things. These are, for example, discussions which I was just recently having with regards to self-sovereign identity and different solutions in Europe, which might come up with a new EIDAS and self-sovereign identity based on blockchain backbones and so on and so forth. Standardization is something which we should have an eye on if we, at a certain point in future, want to somehow either merge some networks or establish interoperability.
That's fantastic, Sebastian. And yes, I'm still conscious of the wholesale payment piece, but you just touched there on the sovereign identity, okay? And I think that's a very, very important point, and we'll circle back because it's also already picked up in one of the questions as well. If I look at the title of our discussion, DLT in the Future of Financial Institutions, I think it's indisputable. I mean, it cannot be disputed really that there has to be certainly a move to what now is being discussed or named Web3, where we actually own that data. We own that digital identity data. Is there a future, or is there a role for financial institutions to help us in that transition? How do you see that happening? And in your experience, and that's a question for you first, Sebastian, but I think also Juan, in your role within Santander and also in Lastria, I know you've all dabbed and done POCs and projects of sorts. And I definitely do think there's an element of this transition to potentially a time in the future where in a Web3 environment where we do own it, but clearly, it's not going to happen in 2-3 years. And potentially there's a role for financial institutions to fill in that gap to help us get to that point. What do you think about that? Sebastian, you want to go first, or I'll give you a break and ask Juan?
I'll go first. No problem.
Thanks, Juan.
Yeah. I mean, I'm witnessing this one in Alastria mainly as and it connects. It's a good segue as well with the first with the other question about interoperability and which type of networks. What we have in Alastria, well, we are already 600 members. We have 2 networks working, operating in production, one in Quorum and another one in Hyperledger Besu. And the end game, of course, is connecting both and making them fully interoperable, which is not the case nowadays, but it will be, for the members and the partners not being trapped by the technology, being able to work no matter which technological choice you get. But what we have here is something that is public permissioned. And why? Because at a certain level or to a certain extent, and after exploring all the the beauty of the public networks, the incumbents and also the challengers in every single sector of the economy, when they want to go serious with blockchain, which I think is the way to go now after all this POC phase and stuff, they need predictability, and they need also accountability, and they need to operate on top of networks that are able to sign a service level agreement. And if not, I mean, if you go in this very democratic and maybe libertarian way of, hey guys, I mean, we're doing networks here on a best effort basis, I think you're not getting anywhere. And predictability in terms of the cost of minting assets or mining transactions. Ether is through the roof, gas is through the roof, and any member on top of a network need to understand the cost. And the promise of blockchain is that this amazing technology was going to be more efficient. If the gas is super expensive, we always make a joke here with a company that was very obsessed about tracing and providing the provenance of the goods that they were selling, but the traceability was more expensive than the good itself. Yeah, and we don't want that, of course, because the economics have to work. Now, what we are thinking, and this is the next evolution of Alastria, this is the Alastria 3.0, is to build a network operator that is neutral, that sits very underneath every single actor in the ecosystem and is in charge of exchanging all the flows, all the blockchain flows, as it works in the internet, in the Web 1 and Web 2. We all have neutral points. We don't know that they're there. We don't really care as internet users, but they're there exchanging the traffic of the telcos and over any data or voice company, and it works. So, and in blockchain we don't have that, and we need that, and this is why we're putting together this concept, and we would love Alastria become the network operator, the neutral point, at least in Spain, and why not in Europe, because it's pretty much needed by anyone that is now into implementation phase. We have more than 80 cases into production, 80 use cases, but we should have, maybe 800 or 8,000. And this is what we're pursuing. To your question about the future of financial services, well, financial institutions, financial services is a broad industry. So it's not the same when you think of retail banking, when you think of payments, when you think of wholesale, when you think of insurance, asset management, wealth management, whatnot. What I can tell you is that maybe we took it wrong in the beginning. Now thinking with the perspective of years, we started in payments. We thought that blockchain was an amazing technology for moving money around the world. Now that I think of it, I don't know, maybe we wouldn't start from there. maybe we would think of, hey guys, I mean, we're better off thinking of course, streamlining processes is always nice. Yeah, you go like eroding the cost base, but you know, we should be we should be in this next phase more braver and think of building new revenue models, building new business models as in the flourishing of internet, all the e-commerce platforms, all the you know the guys that went so strong in this market that now are leading, you know, the so-called GAFAs, the Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple. They built something because they had some infrastructure. Now on blockchain, we don't have this infrastructure. Once we have it, I'm sure that there would be more and more players that would come across with the combination of an infrastructure and a clearer regulation.
Very good. Wow, Juan, thank you for this. Listen, Tanya, I also wanted to hear from you. Sebastian, we parked the wholesale payments and we won't get a chance to talk about it, which means Danielle and Victoria will have to invite us to come back to the next EBC session so we can just talk about that. In the next 30 seconds, or maybe I will say maybe 60 seconds, Danielle and Victoria allow me just before the next panel discussion. What I'm taking away from our very brief discussion is there is a future of financial institutions when it comes to DLT. It's a future that actually will mean utilizing the technology to deliver the data integrity, privacy, the performance, the efficiency, the predictability, the accountability that the sector would require to do the transition potentially to a Web3 in the future. But there's definitely a future for it. That it needs more interoperability, that it needs a lot more banks working together, financial institutions working together. Yes, but obviously all those other things need to happen first. And I love the analogy of the islands that Sebastian gave. So there's a lot of islands, but somehow we need to build those bridges that allows for all that to work together. So I hope there's a good summary of the 45 minutes of discussion that we've had. We're leaving this discussion, for me, hungry for more. I learned a lot from the three of you. We've parked a couple of topics. Thanks to the audience for all the questions. I'm sorry, we barely, I think, managed to answer 3 out of the many. Thank you again, Tanya, Sebastian, and Juan. And I do hope that we get to meet again in the EBC for continuing our discussions. Thank you again for all your insights. Have a good day in Tanya.
Thank you.
Thank you.